My name is Phil Davidson. This is the Veckelplan VST 42E shred truck. Shred truck is a single shaft shredder with a hydraulic ram that pushes the material into the cutting surface. Our truck is very smart because our truck knows when it needs material and how to feed itself and how to correct bridges. Our truck virtually has no bridges due to the action of the hydraulic ram. The 42E is electrically driven through the PTO to a generator housed within this toolbox on the side. The operation is started by turning on the ignition, starting the truck. Once the truck is running, the operator will push the master switch inside on the dashboard. This will not yet start the truck as we have a external master switch on the control panel, but this must be pushed in order for the outside master switch to operate. Once the truck is running and the master switch is pushed, the operator will then get out of the truck and go around to the control panel. Once the truck is running and the internal master switch is pushed, the operator will come out and turn on the external master switch. This master switch then will engage the PTO and ramp the truck up. When the engine of the truck ramps up, our HMI will come online. The HMI takes a few minutes to boot up, but we don't have to wait for that HMI to completely boot up before we start operating the truck. Within 20 seconds of starting the truck, we'll push the reset button, and then our truck will start operating. Now I'm operating the lift just to show you that the HMI was not yet up, so we're starting the truck. The operator's wheel consists of the motor up and down. The operator will push both the up-down buttons to grip the gripper, and then push the up button to get the gripper going up. The down button will remove the button down, and when the gripper lands at the bottom, it will open itself up. This button starts our auger. Our shredder will not start without our auger started. We push auger start, then shredder start, and that starts the operation of the truck. On this side of our control panel, we have our discharge start and stop. This will start the operation of the walking floor to unload the truck. This will stop the walking floor from operating when we push this button. We have a transmission lock unlock key. This allows us to put the key in, lock the transmission, remove the key, put it in our pocket, and as the truck's outside shredding and the operator is inside getting a tow, your partner may be around doing something else. Somebody can't jump in the truck and put it in gear. This will stop the truck from being able to be put into drive. We have an emergency stop button on this panel. If anything ever happens, any problem ever arises, the operator pushes the e-stop, and that will shut the operation of the truck down. The reset button will reset any of the faults that are deployed on the HMI screen. Once the truck boots up, the HMI will display this screen here. And this is our main screen that allows us to go to our screens for operation. We have several different screens here. The first one is the input-output screen. This screen here mimics what's going on in our PLC and is there and designed to help the operator diagnose any issues that may happen with our service department. 336-431-0101 is our service number that will bring you to any of our techs that are available at the time that can help you to diagnose any issues that you have. Push the main screen button, we go back to our main screen, our event history. Our event history records every action that happens with the shredder. It will record when it is started, when it is stopped, any faults that are displayed, if the torque switch is deployed, anything that occurs within the machine will be kept track of on this event history screen with a date and a time. This is a great management tool to help the managers look back at what's been happening with this truck during the day. You can sort the events by each type of event. You can page up, page down, you can page each event, you can go by page, or go back to the main menu. We have a troubleshooting screen. The troubleshooting screen displays the 21 alarms that could conceivably come up. When the fault occurs, the main screen will go to the alarm screen. The alarm screen will tell you what the fault is. In this case, it says screen door banker box open. We can acknowledge it and clear it, or we can ask for more information. When we ask for more information, this screen will bring us to the flow chart to help us diagnose. This particular fault was caused because the screen door wasn't locked down completely and bounced open off the limit switch we saw earlier in the main menu. Now I can go to my main menu, and go back to my machine operation, push my reset, my fault's clear, my machine's ready. The machine operation screen is a screen that the operator is going to use regularly while he is operating this truck. The machine operation shows you the amps or load on all of the different components. That would be the auger motor, the rotor motor, and the hydraulic motor. The amps or load on the rotor motor control what our hydraulic ram does. As we amp up the rotor motor, we back off our ram, which makes our truck smart. Our truck pushes in as much material as it can into the rotor to get maximum throughput, and once it gets to its load point, it will stop. If it overloads itself, the ram will back off to stop the feed of the paper into the rotor. If something really large goes into the rotor and causes it to overload for X amount of time before the rotor jams, our rotor will stop, reverse, clear its jam, and continue forward. The rotor can be manually reversed. The manual rotor reverse will not operate during normal operation. Manual rotor reverse can only operate when the machine is turned on but not started. Manual ram reverse will operate during operation of the machine. Press the manual ram reverse and the ram will come all the way back home, stop, and continue forward. The auto stop switch, when it's pushed, the green light comes on, the auto stop has the machine run for 5 minutes after it sees no load on the rotor, and then will shut itself down. This feature is for the last load of the day. Operator puts the last load in, rotor's loaded up, he pushes auto stop, he can do his cleanup once his bin's away. When the shredder's empty, it'll shut itself off. Operator realizes that, comes around, shuts the machine down, carries on to his next stop. The tote count. The tote count is activated by the middle limit switch. Push the tote count to 0. Once you arrive at the location, every time the lift is lifted, the tote will count 1 tote. And the machine run hours. This is the hard run hours. This will tell you how many hours this machine has run for its entire life. Cutter hours should be reset after a cutter rotation. This is protected by a password so that people can't just go in and reset the cutter hours and you lose track of it. My personal opinion is after a maintenance I always log the machine run hours. In the event that these cutter hours are reset by mistake, you have a good amount of hours to know when your last rotation is done at. You log in, you put the username, the password, you accept, it will reset the cutter hours. The other thing that makes our truck smart is we have several different buttons to push based on materials. High volume paper, tape and fill bottles, books, textiles, and hard drives. These 5 items change the way the machine operates. When I push high volume paper, I get the highest speed on the rotor and the most aggression on the ram. And as I go to the different options, down to hard drives, once I hit hard drives, I have slowed the rotor down considerably and made the ram much more passive. That way we protect our machine with the many different types of materials that we're able to run. To operate the truck, the operator will roll the tote into the grip electric. Push auger start. See the amperage comes up showing that the auger's running. Push shredder start. The amperage is up on our shredder and our hydraulic motor. In order to clamp, in, double push, get clamp, push the loader up. Dump our first toe. Down. Remove this toe, we immediately put in another toe. Clamp it. Lift it up. Our lifter is going to pause the way up. If we had paper in the shredder at this point, our amperage on our rotor motor would be up. Our tote is going to be sitting here waiting automatically to load more paper in. Once the paper that is in the chamber gets run through the machine, the amperage will drop down, our tote will see that it's down, and it will automatically put the paper in. This allows the operator to do other things around the machine during loading. It's not recommended that an operator leave the machine running, the tote up, and not be at the machine. Stop the machine, push auger shredder stop, and the entire system will shut down. As the shredder shreds, the material is going to come through the screen, into the auger, and out of the auger. The auger will build a pile in front of it. As the auger amps up, our walking floor will walk the pile. As the pile walks, we keep a very full load and are able to fill this cavity almost full. Once the cavity fills up and the walking floor can no longer move the pile, the auger will amp up or load up and realize it's full. A payload full will come on the HMI screen. Once the payload is full, the legal capacity of this truck has been met and the truck needs to be emptied. The walking floor will walk every third slat forward and then all slats backwards and unload the pile once the door is open and the operator has turned on the walking floor. This walking floor can be operated from the control panel on the push buttons or from the remote control which is provided to start and stop the floor. One option on the VST42E is a banker box door. The banker box door allows you to unload banker boxes into the shredder without having to put them in totes. There's an interlock switch on the door. If the shredder were running and I wanted to load some banker boxes, I would pull the switch out, the shredder will stop. I lift my banker box door, I load my boxes into the shredder, close the door, put the limit switch back in, I go back around and start the truck. The staircase here is made to make it easy and safe to bring your banker boxes up here and load them into the shredder. It's important that this limit switch does not get overridden. When this banker box door is open, the rotor cutting head is running and your hands can be very close to it. The hydraulic ram is moving back and forth. Your hands can be very close to that. It is important that that switch stays intact. Another option on the 42E is plug and play. This allows us to put a service in at your plant. You can take these plugs, disconnect the generator from the control panel, plug into your three-phase service within your plant, and you can run our truck as a plant-based machine without having to run the diesel engine. This allows you to shred after hours. Those people who don't have a plant-based shredder will be able to plug into their plant and use this machine as a plant-based shredder. Just a few safety tips on the VST 42E to be cautious of. When the PTO is engaged, the drive shaft will be spinning. It's important that when PTO is engaged, nobody gets underneath that truck, as it could cause them harm or death. The generator and the plant power within this toolbox. It's important that when the disconnect on the plant power is engaged, or the PTO is running and the generator is creating power, that no one goes into this toolbox unless they are a certified electrical technician. Control panels. Very important that power is turned off before anyone enters the control panel unless they are a qualified electrician or understand high voltage electricity. Banker box door. As stated earlier, it's important nobody overrides any switches or interlocks that we have put within this truck in order to keep people from getting into moving parts. Guards should always be kept intact. Never operate the shredder without the belt guard. Someone could get their hand in there, could be hurt. There's placards on all of these things to let you know that. Rotor, if ever you're doing any welding on the rotor, it's important that your ground is attached to the rotor. Otherwise you can damage the bearings. The generator is housed within the toolbox. There is high voltage within this. There are placards to warn of the high voltage. It's very important only qualified electrical people go into this generator while it's running. This machine operates off of 460 volts out of this generator. The 460 volts are fed into the bottom end of this control panel. The bottom of the control panel houses all the high voltage components. The top of the control panel houses all of the low voltage components. These are placarded high voltage, and it is only recommended that qualified electrical knowledgeable people go into this control panel while the generator is running or the plant power is plugged in. It is very important that all plant power or diesel engine are shut down when someone is in this control panel. There are filters in these control panels. One in the bottom, one in the top. Air is drawn in the bottom and out the top of the panel to help cool the panel. The filter on the inside of this grate will keep the dirt out of the panel. It's recommended that these filters are cleaned daily. The auger can operate with the back doors of the truck open. It is important that the machine is never run with the doors open. If the auger is run while the truck's empty, it is possible for someone to come in here and get tangled in this auger, and they could cause them harm or death. The gripper lifter. When the gripper lifter is being operated, it is important that the operator stands away from the area where the tote could fall. If the operator is working with a partner or has a customer nearby, it's important that when the tote is being lifted, that all personnel are kept very clear of the area where the tote is lifting. The truck itself requires that it is in park with the handbrake deployed before the PTO will engage or the shredder will start for safety purposes. As a standard safety, it's important no one opens the hood and works on the engine of the truck with the engine running. It is always important to keep personnel away from moving parts. One of the wear items you're going to have to change on the machine is the cutters and the counter knives. These are the cutting surfaces that bring the material down to size and get put through the screen. Changing the cutters and counter knives are very simple. Not a whole lot to it. Very important that you use a torque wrench. Torque the cutters and counter knives to their specific torques. The torques are found in the service manual. To change a cutter, very simply, you crack the bolt, undo the bolt, remove the bolt from the cutter. Once the cutter is removed from the holder, take a scraper, screwdriver, clean out the holder. Very important that the holder is flat and clean, and that when you do the rotation of the cutter, and each cutter has 4 points to be able to rotate to, that you try the cutter on the holder and make sure that the cutter doesn't rock. If you've hit any metal and you have damaged the holder, when the cutter rocks on the holder, it's recommended that the cutter be left off. Once you have 3 or 4 holders that need to be replaced, they can be cut off and re-welded in at a later date. Better to leave a cutter off than put a cutter on a bad holder, have it fall off and damage more cutters. Once you've cleaned the surface around the cutter holder, rotate the cutter 90 degrees onto your next tip. Put the bolt back in by hand. Do not use an impact gun. You don't want to over torque it. Set your torque wrench to the correct torque and retorque it at the correct torque. Once you've done all of the cutters and put them in, as you torque them, you can see this cutter here has been painted blue. It's important that you mark each cutter, and after you've installed and retorqued all cutters, you go over the complete rotor and ensure that all cutters have been torqued and marked. If you see one that hasn't been marked, retorque it, mark it again. The last thing you want to do is have a cutter falling off. Counter knife is in the floor of the machine. The counter knife is the opposite cutting surface to the cutter. The cutter passes through the counter knife and cuts the paper. It is the other side of your grandmother's pinking shears. It's important that this tolerance is tight. It's important that this counter knife is kept sharp. And the tolerances are kept as close as possible. To change this counter knife, I've removed some of the bolts already. You remove 6 bolts on each counter knife. Counter knife comes in 2 pieces. Take your ratchet, crack the bolts. Once the bolts have been loosened, remove all the bolts from the floor of the machine. Once all 6 bolts have been removed from the counter knife, just take a screwdriver, put it in the front of the counter knife, lift it up towards you, and pull the counter knife out. Again, set the counter knife aside. Give the area around the counter knife a good cleaning. You want to make sure that this surface is clean and flat and no material left stuck in it. Ensure that the holes have been cleaned out. It's good to take a vacuum or an airline, blow these holes out. You want to make sure that these holes are a dead hole, and paper can get packed in. If you pack paper in the bottom of those holes, the bolt will not torque completely down. Once you take the new counter knife, you want to slip it back in
and that counter knife will go all the way to the back. There will be a considerable gap between the cutter and the counter knife. I normally put 2 bolts back in, just snug. Once the bolts have been tightened just to snug, just enough so that I can put a screwdriver in front and I can manipulate the counter knife back and forth, I'm going to put a cutter in the counter knife and get the gap as tight as I can get it without hitting. The recommended value is 20 thousandths of an inch, but the tighter that gap is, the better we are. I'll then take my rotor, bring the next cutter up, again check my gap as tight as I can get it, manipulate it so that it is as tight as it can be. Bring the next cutter up into it. You see that cutter is just a touch tight. Bring that counter knife back a little bit to make that gap correct. Bring my next cutter up through. Make sure that that's a good torque. My cutters look like they are got a good gap all the way across every tip of the counter knife. 1 cutter from each tip has gone through. I'm now going to reinstall the other 6 bolts and torque them to the correct value. Values again are in the manual. Use the manual and then you won't have any problems with the bolts coming loose or the counter knife breaking. There are 2 more wear items that need to be changed, not regularly, every couple of years. We do have some UHMW guide rails that are on both sides of the ram. The ram travels back and forth within the guide rail. It's important that they're kept tight. There are wipers on the top side of the ram and the bottom side of the ram. There's access information in the manual again. Very good pictures of how these things are changed. We're not going to get into pulling these out and changing them in these videos, but again, the wear items are cutters, counter knives, guide rails, and wipers. And cutters and counter knives need to be changed fairly regularly. Wipers and guide rails every year to 2 years. Paper's not a very abrasive material, so something to keep your eyes on when you're doing your maintenance checks. Gearbox oil should be checked fairly regularly, probably every time you have a cutter rotation, unless you see a leak of any kind. Gearbox oil is checked fairly simply by removing the dipstick, pulling it out, and checking the level on the dipstick. There are 2 marks to show you a high and low. Dipstick is returned. Beside the dipstick is a plug that can be removed to fill the oil. The oil is Mobil SHC 634. That is a 460 weight gear oil, synthetic. Belt tensions should also be checked fairly regularly. The belt should be tightened to 35 pounds at a 1/4 inch deflection. Belt tensioning tools are available at any supply shop, industrial supply shop. The instructions on tightening the belt are in your manual and give you a very good picture of how to tighten the belt. The belt tightens via this threaded rod. It's double nutted on the front and single nutted on the back. It's important when you remove these nuts and adjust this belt tension in. We tighten this bolt to adjust the tension. We double nut to jam nut the outside bolt. And then the inside bolt is critical that it is retightened so that it doesn't come loose as we get some bounce from the machine running. The hydraulic unit is at the back end of the shredder. The hydraulic unit has virtually no maintenance. In behind this hydraulic motor is the hydraulic filter. It is a spin-off filter, very similar to your car oil filter. There is a drain plug in the hydraulic tank right here. You can drain the oil out, put the plug back in, fill the oil through the oil fill, The oil level can be checked via the sight glass at the front of the hydraulic tank. There is a level indicator and a sight glass to see the level of the oil. The oil is AW68 hydraulic oil. In the event you have a very cold location, we recommend in the wintertime that you go to an AW32 hydraulic oil. This will give you a little bit thinner of an oil and allow better operation during the cold weather. There's a temp level switch in this hydraulic pack that will turn the machine off if the oil gets too hot or the level gets low. There also is a pressure gauge. This pressure gauge has a tap at the bottom. We recommend during operation that this tap is closed and only open for diagnostic purposes. The guard at the back of the machine here is removable. It's recommended for safety purposes. It is left on at all times during the operation of the machine to keep people out of the hydraulic ram. But there will be some dust and some material that will get in there. Every so often it's recommended this guard gets removed and this cavity gets cleaned out with a vacuum. The torque switch. The torque switch is there to protect the machine from a metal hit. In the event you hit a metal hit, this switch will be deployed. This shock absorber looking item, which is your spindle bolt, has spring washers within it. This measurement is critical. If it ever comes loose or it ever is taken apart for maintenance, that this dimension is maintained. The dimension is in the manual. The torque switch needs to be about 1 millimeter or the width of a 10-cent piece. As the machine runs, the torque arm will bounce on the spindle bolt. This gives you #1 shock absorption as you're shredding so that the gearbox doesn't take a hit. Also gives you shock absorption so that when you hit metal, it will deploy the switch. When the switch gets deployed, you will see a message on your HMI that says tramp metal hit, torque switch deployed. You need to go into the shredder if this torque switch gets deployed and check for metal. There are several grease fittings on the machine that need to be taken care of. The first one is on the bearing behind the gearbox. There is a grease fitting right there. The greasing amounts and how often you have to do them are in the manual. It's every 50 hours, 3 pumps is what we say. The manual will tell you how many ounces, but every 50 hours, 3 pumps of grease in your rotor bearing. The opposite side of the shredder has another grease fitting over here. Same amount applies, 3 pumps every 50 hours. Don't over-grease these bearings. It's important that you just stick to the amount recommended. One more grease fitting is right here on the wall of the machine. That brings the grease line down to the auger bearing. That will grease the auger bearing. Same amount, 3 pumps every 50 hours. Inside the machine here, we've removed this cover ahead of time for this video. There's a cover that you remove from this area. You're able to access the auger gearbox. The auger gearbox is filled with 220 weight synthetic gear oil. What you need to put in it is marked on the tag on the gearbox. The level should be up to this plug. You pull out the plug, put your finger in there, the oil level should be up to approximately this level. Oil level in the gearbox does not need to be changed regularly, should be changed every 2,000 hours or once a year. And it's important during your maintenance is that all of these bolts are checked on a regular basis, especially when a machine is new. A lot of vibration in this machine, cutter rotations, greasing. It's always good to look your machine over and make sure that you don't have any loose bolts. One thing to note back here in this area is this photo sensor. That photo sensor recognizes that the auger is turning. We put that there so that if there is a problem with a gearbox or a shaft on the auger and it stops turning, this sensor will give you a fault on your HMI and will shut the machine down. We'll not let the machine run unless we get a pulse from this sensor every so often. We're going around to the screen now. We'll show you that sensor from the inside. As your machine's operating, the auger is going to turn. This is the discharge, where the material is going to come out into your payload area. The screen is accessed via the screen access door. The door has a limit switch on it. If you open this door with the machine running, the machine will shut down and your HMI will display a screen door open fault. The sizing screen, which is in this machine, is what determines the particle size. The particle size is determined based on the holes. These screens are changed by taking off the 9 bolts top and bottom and pulling the screen out. You can change the screen, put the new screen in, bolt the bolts in. You can note here there is some shims on this screen. The reason for that is this screen, bolted on without shims, would hit the cutters and not allow it to turn. The shims get put into the screen so that the cutters are just slightly touching the screen. This is what we call a zero tolerance screen. The closer that cutter is to the screen, the better a cut you're going to get and the more material you're going to get through that screen. So when installing a screen, it's important it is centered up and down, and it's important that the cutters are just touching. They'll probably, on a new screen, make a little bit of noise when it starts up, but that's good. We want those cutters as tight as we can to that screen. If you zero in a little bit more on this, the actual flag on the auger, there's the front end of that photo eye we discussed earlier. That photo eye is watching for this flag. As this turns, it wants to see that pulse from that photo eye to ensure this auger is moving. We don't want the material to build up inside without being removed, so we will shut the machine down in the event that we have a problem. This lifter is a gripper lifter. There's a few grease points on the gripper itself. The gripper has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on the actual gripper. If you come around here, there's the 7th point back in here on the cylinder. There's 1 point on the lower bearing. And there is 1 point on the upper bearing at the top of the candy cane lift. Every time you do a cutter rotation, you should put 3 or 4 pumps of grease in each of these grease fittings to keep these pivots lubricated. The chain is important that it is kept tensioned. The chain tensioning is in the manual. You bring the gripper up to the top of the candy cane, and you should just be able to get your fingers just inside the lifter. Raise the gripper tipper up to the top apex of the candy cane lift. Basically, we want to just be able to put our fingers in behind this chain. It shows a good chain tension. Always check the chain tension with the lifter at the top. It removes the weight of the lifter from hanging on the chain and gives you a good indication of tension. If the chain becomes too loose, it can fold itself over top of itself and jam on this sprocket. The main cause of a jamming chain is that it is too loose. This chain needs to be clean and lubricated on a regular basis. An operator will be at this chain on a fairly regular basis. When he sees it's getting dry or rusty, it should be lubricated. Regular spray chain lube is a perfect thing. You can find it at any industrial supply. During the maintenance of the lifter, it's
important that you inspect the 3 limit switches. We have one limit switch right here. You can tell the lift that is at the very bottom. We have a center limit switch, which is right here, that tells the lift when to pause when you have a load. The third limit switch is up over the apex on the inside of the machine. Those 3 limit switches should be checked for tension, that they're secured to the candy cane, and that the arm moves freely and all components are not damaged. Gripper lifter has its own separate power pack on it for the grip component of the lift. The gripper lifter has a plastic tank. You can see the level on the tank. The level should be about 3/4 to 5/8 the way up. There's a fill point at the back of the tank to allow you to add oil to it. Again, the oil is AW68 hydraulic oil, and in cold winter conditions, that oil can be changed to a 32 oil to make it thinner and easier to operate in cold conditions.